In this video, we're going to work example problems where we find derivatives of functions, and those functions contain trigonometric functions. So we're practicing derivatives of trigonometric functions in this video. To take these derivatives, we're going to reference this table here, which shows the derivatives of all of the trig functions, not inverse trig functions. We'll do that in a later section, another video. Okay, let's get started. So to find f prime of x here, we need to use the product rule. Here's one function of x, here's another function of x. So the derivative of the first function is 2x times the second, okay, plus the derivative of the second function. What is the derivative of sine x? Well, we can reference the table, but you should probably memorize that. The derivative of sine of x is cosine of x times the second, x squared. So we'll have x squared cosine x. And that's it. That's the derivative. All right, here we need to use the product rule again. Here's one function of x, here's another function of x. The derivative of the first, e to the x, times the second, plus the derivative of the second. The derivative of cosine of x is minus sine of x, times the first. Okay, so we can simplify this a little bit. That's the derivative, but let's clean this up a little bit. So we can factor out an e to the x, and we're left with cosine of x minus sine of x. And that's the derivative. Okay, we need to use the product rule again. We've got one function of theta times another function of theta. So the derivative of the first, what is the derivative of secant theta? Secant theta tangent theta. Okay, plus the derivative of the second. The derivative of tangent theta is secant squared theta times the first. Okay, so now let's just clean this up. So we've got secant theta tangent theta plus secant cubed theta. Okay, so we can factor out a secant theta, and we're left with secant squared theta plus tangent theta, and that's the derivative. Okay, so we can just do this derivative and then plus this derivative. The derivative of c cosine t. C is a constant, so it's just c times the derivative of cosine t. The derivative of cosine t is minus sine t, so minus c sine t. Okay, plus this derivative, we need to use the product rule. So the derivative of the first, 2t, times the second. All right, plus the derivative of the second times the first. So let's see what we have here. Minus c sine t plus 2t sine t plus t squared cosine t. And that's the derivative. Okay, here we need to use the quotient rule. So the derivative of the top, 1. The derivative with respect to x of x is just 1. Times the bottom, minus the derivative of the bottom. The derivative of 2 is 0. The derivative of minus tangent x is minus secant squared of x times the top, all over the bottom squared. Okay, so we've got 2 minus tangent x plus x secant squared x over 2 minus tangent x squared. And that's the derivative. Okay, let's use the quotient rule again. So the derivative of the top times the bottom minus the derivative of the bottom. So times the top all over the bottom squared. So we have okay, now sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta is 1. So we've got okay, so if we put this in parentheses, we can see that this cancels. So we're left with and that's the derivative. Okay, let's use the quotient rule again. The derivative of the top. Here we need to use the product rule. So derivative of, so this is the one function of t, this is the second function of t. The derivative of the first, 1, times the second, plus the derivative of the second, which is cosine of t, times the first. So t cosine t. Okay, so that's the derivative of the top, times the bottom, minus the derivative of the bottom is just 1 times the top all over the bottom squared. So that's the derivative. Let's just simplify. So let's distribute this here. We've got sine t plus t sine t plus t cosine t plus t squared cosine t minus t sine t, and then okay, so we can add the corresponding cosine of t and sine of t terms. So we've got t squared plus t cosine of t, and then these go away, so we're left with just sine of t okay, that's the derivative. Okay, we're going to have to use the product rule here. We'll say that this is g theta and this is h theta. Okay, so the derivative of the first, so the derivative of g theta is what? So now we have to use the product rule here. So as far as just this, the derivative of the first is 1 times the second is cosine theta, plus derivative of the second, so minus sine theta, times the first, so this is going to be minus theta sine theta. Okay? So that's the derivative of g theta. So now we're doing two product rules at once here, so it's kind of confusing. So the derivative of g theta times h theta plus the derivative of h theta times g theta. Okay? So we've got sine theta cosine theta minus theta sine squared theta plus theta cosine squared theta. We know that cosine squared theta minus sine squared theta is cosine of 2 theta, so we can do factor out a theta here. So we get okay, now this sine theta cosine theta, we know that sine of 2 theta is 2 sine theta cosine theta. So we can say this. 1/2 sine of 2 theta, right? Because sine of 2 theta is 2 sine theta cosine theta. If we and so with the 1/2 we would get this. So plus theta cosine of 2 theta. And that's the derivative.